Good morning, folks. This morning we come to a subject that impacts the lives of all of us as God's children. The subject is sin. Now, not sin in general, but my own personal sin and your own personal sin. David, the author of this psalm, is of course infamous for sin associated with a particular incident in his life. We have the record of that incident and the fallout from his sin given to us in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and indeed the subsequent chapters. He committed adultery with Bathsheba, another man's wife. And then, in the aftermath of having committed adultery, he arranges the murder of her husband Uriah, so that he could take Bathsheba to be his own wife. In his book, Disciplines of a Godly Man, R. Kent Hughes, the author of that book, devotes a chapter to David's adultery with Bathsheba. And in that chapter, he shows expertly how, in breaking the sixth commandment, David also broke all the other commands. One sin was in fact 10 sins. And the point that Hughes is making is that sins are never alone. There are always other sins that lead to one sin and accompany that sin, and there are often other sins that flow from that sin. In today's verse, which is verse 12 of Psalm 40, David says, "My iniquities have overtaken me, and I cannot see. They are more than the hairs of my head. My heart fails me." It's clear that David is aware of his sin, and he's also aware that the circumstances that he was facing, hardship, trouble, suffering, that often such circumstances are the consequences of personal sin. Perhaps the personal hardships of which David speaks in this psalm had caused him to reflect upon his own failings as a child of God, his own sins against God. And as he seriously reflects, he realizes just how often he sins against the Lord. Certainly in verse 12, he acknowledges he is a great sinner. He uses a picture to speak of the innumerable ways in which he has sinned against God. He says, "My sins are more than the hairs of my head." And the thought of all the ways in which, in all the times that he has sinned against the Lord, it overwhelms him. He feels awful. He says his heart fails him. He feels as though he can't possibly be right with God. Now, we live in a very different world from David. We have much more to distract us each day than he did. And we rarely do what the ancients, like David, often did, taking time out to think about our personal relationship with God, the sins we commit, how faithful or unfaithful we have been to the Lord. Life in the 21st century is so busy. We don't have time, and we don't make time, and we don't think it's wise to have such introspection. And sadly, this is actually to our spiritual detriment. It is right and good for us to take time out and to reflect and meditate on spiritual things, even on our sins and our failings. When we do so, we begin to see just how sinful we can be at times. When we shine the torch of truth into our hearts and into our minds, we find all manner of sins. Many of those sins are inward and can't be seen by anyone other than ourselves and, of course, God. Sins of pride, selfishness, wanting to get our own way, sins of malice, holding on to grudges that we have against other people, unrighteous anger, sinful desires, covetousness, lust, jealousy, inner blasphemy, sexual unfaithfulness in our minds, hatred, gossip, slander, deceit, religious formalism on the Lord's day, and so on and so on. And yes, coming to such an awareness of our sinfulness will undoubtedly make us feel as David felt. My heart fails me. We feel overwhelmed by our sins. And Satan will no doubt intrude into our thoughts and bring that accusation against us that he often brings. You, a Christian, when you do this? But brethren, it is good from time to time to take time out and examine our own hearts and to look at our own sinfulness. Why? Why is it good? Because it casts us more upon God and makes us much more appreciative of God's grace and God's forgiveness to us. Seeing his sin, David in verse 13 says, "Be pleased, O Lord, to deliver me. O Lord, make haste to help me." David asked the Lord to deliver him from his sin and from the consequences of his sin. The one against whom he had sinned is the very one to whom he turns to seek help. That's important, brethren. When we are brought face to face with our sins, and whenever we feel overwhelmed by our sins and we're struggling to cope maybe with the consequences of sin we've committed, it is to God, the one against whom we have sinned, that we should turn, and it is from God that we are to seek forgiveness and help. Far from driving us from God, our sense of our own sinfulness drives us to God. And if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and he will forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If God were to mark iniquity, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with him. Every blessing, and I trust you have a blessed Sabbath day.